Um, Let me go back. So I am going to discuss, as we planned last time, about a collection of papers on Jomo Kenyatta, our first president in Kenya. And this is not a comprehensive, I have to make it clear, it's not a comprehensive discussion about Jomo Kenyatta himself. That obviously is a very, very big topic and wide topic. So, and it's a collection of papers from one particular archive. I will be specific where the archive is. The oldest record from that archive, from that collection, is from 1921. It goes all the way to around 1969, 1970, 71, around there. But the oldest is from 1921. So it's very insightful because it shows Kenyatta long before he became anywhere close to the politician he became. All right. So, as I mentioned, this is not a discussion on Kenyatta's overall life or even his political life alone. It's an insight from one particular collection, which we'll dive into. For those who are interested in learning more about him, I will discuss other places you can go to learn more about him, other than the Kenya National Archives, obviously, and the books that he wrote, like Facing Mount Kenya. The other key thing here is that there is nothing really earth-shattering in the records. There is nothing outstanding or that has never been published. I don't think so. But with that in mind, it's still full of insightful and very helpful information about Kenyatta himself, his family, and the circumstances under which he grew up and he became the president. I think most of the records that I have seen cover the periods before independence, so not after independence. The other thing here that I will dwell in a little more is that the presentation about these archives will show some of the challenges involved in historical research. This collection is found in the University of Oxford in their main library. And so that is where I got it from. But I think some of the records may be available locally in Kenya. So you probably don't have to go to the University of Oxford and look up find the records from there. I think some of it may be found locally. However, I cannot tell for sure where they are found. I have an idea, but I don't know for sure. And below the dotted line here, I have three other archives that have some snippets of information about Kenyatta that one may find helpful. Because these are US archives, so the information you have is very, very thin and only snippets of, parts of his life. But it's very helpful. For example, the Richard Nixon Presidential Archives, the Gerald Ford Archives, the Jimmy Carter Archives, and I believe even the president before Lyndon Johnson, JFK. In the JFK archives, there will be something to do with Kenyatta. Probably not very much, but there will be something. I haven't looked into that myself, but I have looked into Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, Jimmy Carter. For example, if you go to the Gerald Ford archives, you will see Kenyatta in 1976 asking and pleading for the US government to provide fighter jets, to overfly the Jamhuri Day celebrations in December 1976. So he did ask, and he gives the explanation why he would like that to happen, and it did happen. So there was an overflight by US fighter jets from the US Navy in 1976. And if you look around on the web, I can provide that link if need be, you will see the celebrations of 1976 Jamhuri Day. You will see the jets flying. And you can clearly tell those are not F-5 jets. Actually, at that time, Kenya did not even have those F-5 jets, the Kenya Air Force. So you can tell those are not Kenyan jets that were overflying. If you go to the Jimmy Carter archives, you will see information that even more interesting, and stuff that you cannot find in the Kenya National Archives. Because you remember, Jimmy Carter became president when Kenyatta was very old, and he died during the Jimmy Carter presidency. So what I found there that's insightful is information, discussions within the U.S. government, State Department, discussing the health of Kenyatta. Apparently, there was a period just before he died. There were periods when he was in a coma or completely unable to play the role of a president. So you will see discussions about that period. The people in Kenya were not aware of what's going on. They were not aware whatsoever that Jomo Kenyatta was in a coma or in a state where he could not play the role of a president. So these are three other archives and probably many more that one can look around. The good thing here is if you write to any of these presidential libraries, the archivist there will be very helpful. They will tell you what kind of documents they have that's digitized, what you can get publicly, and all that. So you don't have to do the legwork or the work yourself. Right, let's keep going. The context of the archives from the University of Oxford is this. This entire collection was collected by a gentleman called Jeremy Murray Brown in 1969 to 70 or 71. I believe he was a journalist, although I'm not 100% sure, but I believe he was a journalist. I'm not sure why he was collecting such in-depth data on Jomo Kenyatta. Perhaps he meant to write a book or something more in-depth. But clearly, the material and the effort he went into this, it was not in a regular journalistic effort. So what he did was he came to Kenya and also in the UK, and he did interviews with many people, like James Gishoro, Biyoko Nange, Tom Boyer, Joseph Murumbi, and many other people. So you can see these are big names. He also went to the Presbyterian Church archives in Nairobi, and he got a lot of records from them. And I have a problem with how this happened. Now, this data, this information from the PCA archives is principally what we are going to look into. And unfortunately or fortunately, it is entirely on private and family matters. Nothing to do with politics, very, very little to do with politics. It's mostly with family matters. There is also a large collection from Jeremy, letters from detention. Letters he sent out to many other people when he was in detention and jail. And I have both here, detention and jail, because most people have a misconception or misunderstanding. You think when he was arrested in 52, that he was put in jail the whole time until he was released. What happened, in fact, is he was in jail for 7 years because he's sentenced for 7 years. After 7 years, they put him in detention. And when he was in detention, they moved him around a few times. So he was not in one place. And the circumstances of each detention facility changed. At one point, during his last year of detention, his wife, Mama Ngina, was able to come with his children and visit and live with him. There were also many people like President Moi. At that time, obviously, he was not president. He did come with many other people to see him. So the pictures that you see of Jomo Kenyatta in detention are from that last maybe 2 years of detention, not jail. Some of the letters are written in Kikuyu language, and some of them are written in longhand. So that makes them sometimes, not always, a little difficult to read, but you can read maybe 80% of it easily without any struggle. Some of the documents are in Kikuyu, but then they are typed by someone else afterwards. And I believe they are typed by the person who was helping Jeremy Brown. And the person typing was doing two things. So they were translating to English and then typing them over. In the process, you can see there is a lot of struggle by the person doing this. If you can read Kikuyu and you look at the English translation, or even if you look at the English translation alone, you can see there are some bits of it that are incorrect, or translated wrongly. The person did not fully understand Kikuyu very, very well. Also, the person, and I think he was a priest in the PCA church, he did not understand the Kenyan context fully. And in some of the communication between that translator and Jeremy Brown's, he mention, he makes reference to that he is struggling with the translation. And this is one of the challenges of anytime you're doing historical research. Documents that are translated, sometimes the original meaning or the original communication is not fully translated into English or the other language. The letters in the PCA archives are very good because one of them, some of those are the oldest ones, the oldest being from 1921. And the reason I said I have a problem with the documents from PCA archives is because those documents are on very private and personal issues. Kenyatta himself. And at the time he was still alive, he was the president. And the nature of the material is so private, you really do not expect that the church would release those documents to other people, to third parties, whatsoever. There are also letters he wrote the very first time when he went to the UK in 1929. So those are very helpful because they show his frame of mind, what he saw, his thinking, and his communication back with his family in 1929. And you might ask yourself the question, when Kenyatta went to the UK in 29, who hosted him? Because after all, at that time there were no other black Kenyans who were living in the UK to host him and show him around. And it turns out there were a number of missionaries and other civil servants, a very small number, who were sympathetic to African grievances. And those are the people who helped to host him. If you remember, or you may not, I don't know if you know this, the colonial government was opposed to him traveling to the UK. And they sent communication to the government in London to avoid seeing Kenyatta, to give him audience. So the visit or the entire trip was opposed by the government itself. So the people who hosted Kenyatta, they did him a big favor. And I believe this is one of the unknown or less known aspects of Kenyan history about the small number, not a big number, but a small number of people, civil servants and missionaries, who were very specific, very sympathetic to African grievances. And in a few times, they really stuck their neck out on Kenyatta's behalf or on Africans' behalf. One of the people who hosted Kenyatta was a gentleman called McGregor Ross. I don't know if you can see this book. So he wrote the book called Kenya from Within. And the book was written in 1927. And it's a very, very good book because it shows a perspective of Kenyan colonial history that you do not read from most other Europeans at that time, or even in the 50s. Very few people were willing to write in such forthright manner against colonialism. Okay. Now, before we go into the material itself, let me mention briefly some of the challenges that you will see. One of them being that a lot of the historical records are overseas, mostly in the UK and other European countries. Also, a little bit in Israel and quite a bit in the US. Not much, not anywhere near the UK, but there is very good information in the US. Now, you may ask yourself, what archives to do with Kenya are in Israel? This is about that little part of Kenyan history when Kenya was supposed to host Jews, to provide a homeland for the Jews around the turn of the previous century. If you want to read that story comprehensively, there is a portion of that material that you have to go to Tel Aviv, or you can only get from Tel Aviv. You don't physically have to go to all these archives yourself. Obviously, it's difficult and expensive to do this. So what you can do is you can go to the archives website, and usually, at least in the UK and the US, they will the website will provide a list of professional researchers you can hire. You'll tell them what you want. They will go in and get the records for you and scan them or take a picture and share them with you, share them back with you. As long as you pay the person, they will do exactly what you want. It's not a very efficient way of doing research because you have to give them exactly what you want. But it's better than having nothing altogether. Number two, there are questionable ethics in how some of these materials are acquired. And this is both good and bad. It's bad because, as I mentioned, there's some information about Kenyatta that you see, which is clearly unethical to have been shared when he was very much alive, and his family were actually very young at the time in 1969. The good thing is, you are able to see information that you probably would never have seen ever. And maybe I can come back to this. Another issue is translation being poor in some parts. Both the language itself and also the culture they were translating from and the context will be missing. The translator have biases sometimes. We all have biases, but their biases come to impact the translation effort. The handwriting can be hard to read. In the Kenyatta papers, the handwriting is maybe 80-90% readable. But if you go to other archives, it could be very, very difficult to read. The last one is we, Kenyans, have not developed a culture for donating personal and professional records to archives for public view. So a lot of people who played important roles in Kenya's independence, and even after independence, did not share their personal records or their memoirs to the general public. I think nowadays we have seen a little bit of a change. I have seen a few people who have written memoirs, and that's a good thing. But it's one thing to write a memoir and another thing to share their records of their work, professional records, and even personal records. So that culture has not been grown over time in Kenya. And so there is a lot of important information that has been lost that way. All right. Now, here are some of the interesting findings. There is many more, so just a few of interesting findings you will see from the Kenyatta papers. You can read the very first letter he wrote after arriving in London in 1929. He arrived there, I think, in March, so it was still cold and still winter, and so you can see his discussion about the cold, the weather, about the size of the city, the trains, the ships, everything. So you can read how he was amazed or his impressions, his initial impressions after arriving in Europe. You can also read the very first letter he wrote after he was arrested in 1952. That letter is maybe 90% of the letters in detention was to his oldest daughter, called Wamboi. So he writes to her often, quite often. When you read those letters that he wrote when he was in the UK and also in detention and jail, you can see his love for his wives. We all know Kenyatta was a polygamist, so he had multiple wives and many children. But you can see the deep love for his wives and their children. And this is important because although this is a somewhat joke, many people joke and say that in the Kikuyu language or the Kikuyu men doesn't have language to express love for their spouse or their kids. But when you look at the writings from Kenyatta, that is not true. He expresses, and we'll take a look at some of the letters there. He expresses love for his wife and their children over and over and over in every single letter he writes. And he uses that word, love. Lastly, you get an insight, a very good insight into the different conditions for each detention location. You remember, he was first in Kapeguria, where the trial was taking place. Then he went to Lodwar, he went to Lokitang, he went to Maralal. So he was in many places, and the conditions were not the same. Also, when you read the papers, you can read this. And this is very important because, um, like I mentioned earlier, many people have a poor understanding of his detention. We think when we see the photos of him in Marara with his wife, we think that's how he was, that he was allowed to have his wife and his children with him during detention. But actually, that only happened during the last maybe 1 year of his detention. For most of his period, he did not have a family. And the same thing with other detainees, they didn't have a family. So if you look up some of the discussions today, you can see ignorance about the conditions of Kenyatta's detention. For example, and I'll show you one example here. Oh, let me go through this. The collection includes a lot of letters from him, as I mentioned, to Wamboi, his second-born child. And you can see references about other prisoners, how they're doing, about the weather, the climate in detention. And he is always asking for updates about everybody in the family. His wives, his children, people's school, people's health. He's asking for books all the time. He likes to read. And there is, although it doesn't say quite clearly, you can tell there is some smuggling of communication going on too. And other items. There was one time he got honey. It's not clear to me whether it was honey or alcohol made from honey. But there was a time he got honey that was sent to him when he was in detention. And he comes back to say, yeah, there were 2 packages of honey. One of them got to me. The other one was lost. It was crashed and we lost it during shipment. There is communication with a few sympathizers, very few, but they are there in the UK. And you have to wonder about the risk those people took to their social status, because Kenyatta was hated by the colonial government and a lot of the settlers in Kenya. And also some people in the UK hated him completely. And they viewed him kind of how we view maybe Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda and all those people. So for those sympathizers in the UK who were brave enough to write to him openly with their own names, it was a risk. And it's good to appreciate their sympathies with our struggle. You will see communication about Edna, his English wife, and their son Peter, and his movements from Lodwar, Lokitang, Mara, and so on. He comments about it all the time, and the conditions about food, how far he can walk, about his letters being read by the police before he could be given the letters, and also when he wrote the letters to his daughter, the letters were also read. He comments on many other things, and like I said, he's always asking for books, papers, and all that. There is one interesting letter, I think in 58. He got the book about the hunt for Dedan Kimathi. So when he was in detention, he got the book that was written by the person who, the people who caught up and killed Kimathi. And you have to wonder what he thought. He doesn't say, but you have to wonder what he thought when he was reading about that development, about the capture of Dedan Kimathi and many other Mau fighters at the time. Like I said, he doesn't discuss politics whatsoever because the communication was being read by the police. So we probably do not know for sure. To my knowledge, he never recorded his thoughts anywhere. But you have to wonder what he thought. All right. Now, I mentioned sometimes people, the general public, have a poor understanding of Kenyan history. And this is one example. So I went to the Facebook and I was looking up discussions about his detention. And you can see here, someone is saying that Kenyatta was leaving Raj at Kapenguria. So when they see Kenyatta here and his wife, Mama Gina, and children, people have this idea that he was always living with his wife in detention. And it's the same thing. You can read it over and over and over again, which led to the ridiculous idea that Kenyatta was always on the side of the colonial government, and he was detained for 9 years. It was a 9-year period. The whole thing was a ruse, but done by the Kenyatta government, by the colonial government. Now, I mentioned about the records here discussing his movements back and forth. So this one is in Kikuyu, so I won't bother reading. But if someone can pause the screen here, you can. If someone can read Kikuyu, you can see it clearly. And here, this one is written, I think, in August of '58, and he is telling Wamboi. So this is in August of '58. So he's telling Wamboi, the time is coming when Mama Ngina will come to join me. And when she comes, she'll come with the younger kids. And because you're going to, so you will be left home. You're not going to come with her. And he gives the reason because there was no appropriate school for her. So this gives you an idea of the type of content that you will read. So, and also it tells you, so in '58, he's in August of '58, the family was not yet there. This family was not there with him. They only came much after 58. And also, if you read at the last bit here, he says, I leave you with peace of God, our creator, of God. And then he says, from your father who loves you very much, Jomo Kenyatta. And like I said, you can see him express love for his children and his family over and over and over in his writings. The idea that the Kikuyu man doesn't know how to express love for his family, it is simply not true. Kenyatta belonged to that generation before people became too westernized, and he clearly could express love for his children and also for his wife. All right, now what we're going to do is to switch to the records themselves and take a look at the samples. But before we go into that, I want to discuss a few overall observations and opportunities based on that collection. I think it would be good to have like a podcast series, for other people or whoever wants to, about the material in this collection. And you can use this material and include materials from the Kenya National Archives and also from the British National Archives, because there's a lot of stuff to do with Kenyatta during that time period. Maybe the entire record, the letters, can be edited and published, maybe online, so for the general public to make it easier for them to view and access the material. Because like I said, a lot of people are uninformed about a lot of the details about that period. And also the last one is there needs to be an aggressive search for other records in our archives. So this is just one at the University of Oxford, but there needs to be a search for other records out there and maybe combine them and share them out somehow, somewhere. All right, so what I'm going to do is to go into some of the records. So I'm going to unshare the screen and share it again. Share a different screen. And I hope you can see it. All right, so I mentioned briefly about the letter from Jomo Kenyatta in 1976 asking for the US government to provide jets to overfly in the Jamhuri Day 76. So this is the letter. He says, "Dear Mr. President," that you can see when it's written from State House, Nairobi. And he says, "I talked last week. We discussed the possibility of the US providing a 6-plane fly past on Jamhuri Day." So this was approved, and you can see the signature. And he was writing to Gerald Ford. This was approved. And if you look through the internet, you will see a video film from 1976. And if you look here, and we'll take a quick listen briefly, you will see the jets flying. Hold on.
Just briefly so that we don't get into copyright issues. Yeah.
And if you look carefully, we are not going to spend any time. I mean, there are people who can explain this better than me. You can clearly see those are not Kenyan fighter jets whatsoever. So the U.S. government did provide the fighter jets. There is a lot of other, tidbits of information. Not a lot, but tidbits of information you can get from the U.S. archives. Like I said, when he was near death, and he was in a coma or some other state, something somewhat similar state. But the Kenyan government was hidden from that development. All right. So now let's take a look at a sample of the documents from the papers, specifically the papers that he wrote, the letters he wrote when he arrived in the UK, and also the documents, the letters he wrote when he was in detention. So this one here that I want to share, and I hope I don't know if it's legible. I hope you can read it.
Yeah, now, yeah. It may be a little bit big, but it can be read.
Yeah. So what you see here are records from the church in 1923. I think there's some going to 1921 about Kenyatta. This was before he became Jomo, so it's very nice. And this is what I said. It's a very personal document about his life, very private, and it shouldn't have been disclosed to anybody by the church. So it is wrong that the document was disclosed. This set of documents was disclosed to a researcher in 1971, in January 71, when Kenyatta was very much still alive and he had a young family. It was wrong that this was disclosed. Anyway, so you can see what he is asking. Uh, he had challenges with the church. He had been the PCA does not have excommunication, doesn't do excommunication. I think what they did was called discipline. That's what it says somewhere there. Something to do with his marriage, about taking alcohol, and other stuff. You can read it for yourself and make a decision when you read it. So it's helpful to understand Kenyatta during that time. You can see how he signed his name, and you can see about the change in culture that was evident even in 1921-23. There was already a very big change in culture. Remember, when Kenyatta was born before 1900. When he was born, there was no Mzungu anywhere. The culture was different when he was born. It was completely Kikuyu tradition. But within 20 years, the society had transformed so much that here is Kenyatta begging and asking over and over, when can my child be baptized? When can we have a wedding in the church? Because that's what he's asking. Apparently, he had asked to have that done like 2 years before. That had not been approved, so he's doing a follow-up. And you can read all these letters and get an idea for yourself. There's no time to look through any of them, but it's all there and it's public information. Let me read just maybe one sentence here. So this is from 1923, about the whole matter and the reason why. And then if you go further in the same document, okay. So there's quite a bit of it, and he writes his name is A.N. Johnston. Like I said, we cannot go into any detail because it's lengthy. There is a ton of documents. I think there is probably maybe 100 or 200 pages of this content alone. His letters from Europe and also the church records. All right, so let's keep going. Let's go to another one here. Now this one is written in 1930, and it's written in Kikuyu, and it's written to Dr. Barlow. So you can see, like I said, when he was in the UK, This was in London in August. So he was in communication with people who were sympathetic to him to a degree or another. So this was one of the persons he felt was sympathetic to him. Today, when you look at the records for Dr. Barlow, you may not share the same view that he was sympathetic to Africans' struggle. But at the time, that's the impression that Kenyatta had. And I'm sure Kenyatta knew him much better than I do. So you can see the document is in Kikuyu. And if you look carefully through this, you can see a translation to English. And I believe that's the one. So this is from August 15th, 1930. And you can see, yep, so this is the same letter now in English. So even if you cannot read in Kikuyu language, you can still get the translations in English. So those are the documents from the church. You can see this is CAC session. If you are familiar with the Presbyterian Church, you would know what CAC session is. And so we will not dwell too much on this. I don't think there is any point. So what we are going to do is to go into another set of records. Bear with me. This is from 1940, from Kenyatta to one of his European sympathizers called Jeffrey Hasbuds. This is during World War II. So he was in the UK at the time, and he was writing to him, and he was trying to connect up and meet up with this guy. I mentioned the difficulty of reading some of the documents, so this is a good example. You can read it, but it takes some effort and dedication to read. You can read maybe 80% of it, not fully, but it is there, and it looks like the original document, although I'm not too sure. So this was in 56 when he was in detention, and he is writing to the same gentleman called Jeffrey Hasbuds in the UK. Like I said, there were people who were sympathetic to African struggle, and so like him, Jeffrey Hasbuds, he was not shy, or he didn't have any problem writing to him under his own name. So the letter was not smuggled, no. It was sent publicly in the formal process to Kenyatta when he was in prison. This is from 1957, I believe. And as you can see, this is in Lokitan. And so we keep going. Like I said, a lot of these documents are also typed. So you can see this one is typed. You can read. It is a ton of documents here. There's a lot of documents that you can read. So let's keep going. There is a set of documents I'm looking for. Okay, I'll get to it. Like I said, he's always asking for papers, books. He's always reminiscing about the past when he knew these people. In this case, this set of documents is from Mr. Jeffrey Hasbuds, and he's talking about the time they met in the UK. Jeffrey Hasbud has sent him some photos. So he is saying he remembers Christmas time in England being a special moment, about the log fire and having good friends enjoying Christmas. Just like you and me enjoy a holiday with your friends or family. And he read a review of a book called Arctic Adventure, and he's asking Jeffrey Hasbud if you can send me the book itself. He just read the review. And so on and so forth. Let's go to another set, and I believe this has the meat of what I would like to show. So this is another set of records. Good. This is when I believe this is the very first document Kenyatta wrote. The very first letter he wrote to Wamboi Kenyatta, Margaret, who became the mayor of Nairobi. And I think she passed away not too long ago, maybe 2017 or thereabouts. And he is writing from Lokitan, NFD, and this is in Swahili. We're not going to read the letter, but it's very easily legible if you just spend maybe half an hour or so. And he says, kwa mtoto wangu, salamu sana, na baada salamu, na kujulisha, kama mimi ni mzima, sina neno. usiwe na hofu yoyote ama huzuni moyoni. Mimi kama labda mmekwisha sikia, nilikamatwa mwezi, it doesn't say mwezi wa 20th of October usiku, na wakati huo huo nikachukuliwa Nairobi na nikatiwa ndani na ndege nikaletwa hapa nchi ya Turkana. Safari ilikuwa njema, hatukuwa na tabu yoyote jiani, na hata hapa nimekaa sina tabu. So he goes on to explain, and you can read all that. You can read the entire letter, and maybe 100 more letters to the same person. So it's a wonderful, wonderful collection to know his state of mind, his thinking about his family, his thought about the future. You can get a very good idea from these records. And he closes the letter this way: Ni baba yako akupendaye, Jomo. That's how he opens and closes all his letters to his children, with a lot of love and everything. For example, you can see here saying, basi sasa kwaheri, wasalimie wote mlio nao, and so on and so on. He is always inquiring about his family, about his wife. At the time, he had 2 wives who were alive. No, 3. Yeah, 3. There was Grace Wahu, the first wife. There was Edna Clark, who was in the UK. There was not much communication, as far as I know, with Edna and the son called Peter. But then there was Mama Gena, who was already the wife at the time. There's another letter from 52 in November, and as you see, we're not going to read it at all, but you can see he writes to Wambui, and he says, kwa mtoto wangu Wambui, salamu sana na baadaye and all that stuff. And he explains in this particular letter, he explains that the police opened all his communication. So he's asking, when he's actually, let me try to read. Salamu sana, na baada ya salamu na kujulisha kama kwamba nimepata barua yako. Asante sana. Ile sehemu ambayo ulikuwa umeandika kwa Kikikuyu sikuipata, hiyo sehemu peke yake, maana police walikata. So the police were going through the records, and they were slicing off the portion that was in Kikuyu. And he goes on, he tells us, so for that reason, just write to me in Swahili, because I wouldn't get the documents anyway. At some point, like I said, it's very funny. He gets honey. And like I said, I don't know if it's honey or if it's alcohol from honey. And he says, he says alcohol is like support for older men. Kitu kama hiyo. It's a very funny way, the way he explains it. And there is another record here from 56. He says, mpenzi mwanangu Wambui. So as you can see clearly, he expresses love over and over and over and over again every time he writes. And if you look through these documents, he is always inquiring about his family. Here I can see he's saying, nilimwandikia baba wako mdogo Mwigai, walakini sijapata majibu yoyote kwake. Kitu kama hiyo. So you can see there is communication. He's getting letters from other people around him, and when he writes and doesn't get a reply, he follows up and asks, hey, what happened to so and so? I wrote to them, they didn't get back to me, all that stuff. He is asking about Ngenda, habari za mjini Ngenda. Ngenda is where he came from. Sijapata kujua yoyote. So he's asking about the village in Ngenda. Some of the documents are not legible. In this case, I sent someone. Like I said, there are professional researchers you can send. You pay them a flat fee. You tell them exactly what you want. So I sent someone who scanned all these documents. This one here is not legible at all. And I think it's the way it was scanned. It's not the original document. So if someone else goes, they should be able to see it. What's interesting here is this one is Fred Kubai. Kubai was one of the detainees too. So this is one of the few documents that have to do with the other detainee, and I wish I could read this. So I'll have to get it again. And so on and so forth. So it starts from 52, goes until Here, by the way, here we can see Fred Kubai here. If you read here on the top right, and here this is also Fred Kubai. So there is reference, like I said, there is a reference to other other detainees who were with him. Not all the documents, not all the letters had to do with were sent to Margaret Wambui Kenyatta. Some were sent to other of his children. Jane Kenyatta was also a recipient of some of the letters, and other people. His wife Grace Wahu did not know how to read or write. I don't think so. So there is no letter whatsoever to his wife, to Grace. But he does send communication back and forth, messages to Grace. When you read the entirety of the records, like I said, there's a lot of records here. You can see a lot of minutiae about his life. For example, there's a place where he's asking Grace to build a better house. And he's asking about something to do with the finances to accomplish that. He was also, when his family was coming to visit him, he would ask them to make sure they buy shoes. Make sure when the kids are coming, make sure you buy them shoes, because the area here is very rocky, very sandy and all that. So you need shoes, and so on. So there is a lot of minutiae that you're seeing. And he says, if you don't have money, there was a time they were coming on a Christmas period, and so he was saying he was wondering if they have money to buy shoes and clothes for the kids. So the impression you get when you read through this, you don't get the impression of someone who was wealthy, Kenyatta at the time. So make of that what you may. But my impression when I read this, in the 50s before independence, Kenyatta was not a wealthy person at all. No. He had means more than other people, obviously. You can see there were photos being shared. So he would ask Wambui and other people to take pictures of his family and share the pictures with him and send the pictures to him, which is something that most people during that time period, many people were probably not able to do. So you get the impression he was not wealthy at all. This letter here to friend Kubai, it's very insightful. Because of time, we wouldn't dwell too much into it. But he goes into many things here. For example, you can see here it says no women, number 2, no drink, number 3, no smoking, all that stuff. So we keep going. And as you can see, the handwriting is somewhat difficult to read. It's not completely impossible, but it's difficult to read. He is writing here about, he's discussing books, and he's asking for the book How to Write Correctly by Professor Duncan. He's also asking for the book Journalism from A to Z by Warren Lau. So there is a lot of requests these people have for books, newspapers, and all that, and writing material. Like I said, at one time he gets the book about the death of Dedan Kimathi, and I really wonder what he thought when he was reading, and when the news came about the capture of Dedan Kimathi and the death, not just of Kimathi, but many other Mau Mau fighters. Because we all know the difficult relationship Kenyatta had, somewhat difficult with Mau Mau. So you do wonder what his thoughts were. So let's keep scrolling down. We won't go through the entire records whatsoever. It's impossible to do. This is a discussion between the translator of this material. So this material appears, these letters in detention, appears to have been in the control of the Presbyterian Church headquarters. I don't know how they came into control them, but that's what there was. So this person was doing the translation and copying to Jeremy Brown. And so you can see the communication here, and the person says they could not, they were having a struggle with translation here and there. When I read the original letter and I read the translation and the struggle here, I don't see where there was a struggle. Clearly, the person doing the translation did not have a person fluent in the language. Time when Kenyatta is in London, I don't know if it's in London or where, in the 1930s or so, and there was a letter in Kikuyu written from somebody to Kenyatta's wife, where Kenyatta's wife Grace was sent along bananas. I said, a bunch of bananas, and the translator is struggling to understand whether it said two bananas or ripe bananas. In Kikuyu, the words are somewhat similar. When you say two bananas, marigo, meri, or ripe bananas, marigo, meru. But any person fluent in Kikuyu should be able to read and understand the context and know clearly what it was. So you can see here, there are some facts where the person is wrong or struggling, not because they mean to, but simply because they are not a native speaker or they don't understand the context very well. There are areas, I don't have the letter here, but it's in the collection. I don't know if I can show it, where you can see their own biases showing. When they do the translation, you can see their biases showing up, and that is unfortunate. So this is a letter from 1960 to Kenyatta. Now this one is translated and typed, so clearly it's not the original from Kenyatta. It's a copy. It's a copy done by someone. But this makes it easy for anyone to read, so that's the good thing. You don't have to struggle with the handwriting. You don't have to struggle with the Kikuyu if you're not familiar with it, so you can read this yourself. And like I said, this is all available publicly to anybody who wants to read. And a good example, let me see, this is a good example of how the writer is struggling for no reason whatsoever. They're struggling with the translation for no reason. It says here, Mama Gena, tells me to tell you that she is delighted with the things you sent. The shoes, which are prettily striped, and those gadgets you hang in quotes Miana with. And here the translator is saying, in brackets, I am not familiar with this word. I think the reference must be to quote hangers, and so on. Anyway, so you can see that person clearly was not familiar with Kikuyu dress or Kikuyu houses. So when they saw words they were not able to translate, they had a struggle with that. And he says here, for example, if you go back here, you can see Kenyatta is asking for he was always asking for clothes, jackets, pants, shorts, socks, shoes. He was constantly asking for stuff when he's ran out. He's always talking about other people. Here he's tell someone, I don't know what that is, that I have had his letter and will write to him later. Greet him, his wife and children on my behalf. Convey our greetings to Wahu. Wahu is his first wife, and tell her that when she requires anything to let you know, and then you will pass the information to me. Tell her to try to fix up her heart as well as possible. Tell the children I shall write them a letter late and for the present receive my greeting, so on. And here's Kafoi greet you Wamboi, so it must be a little Wamboi. So you get the idea. He's always asking and inquiring about his family. So it's a treasure trove of information about Kenyatta, his thoughts, outside of politics, completely outside of politics, because this was in detention, so they were not able to write, to discuss politics openly. The police would get to see. I think the stationery he used, like in this case, you can see it has the crown here, the crown. So it looks like sometimes they were given stationery by the prison, which he used to write letters back and forth. This one seems to be about Fred Kubai, so it will be an interesting one to read if it is indeed about Fred, because that was another detainee, and so on. So I will not go through the entire records. I just wanted to give people a synopsis of what you find when you go through this document. Now, so I am done with the contents now of these letters. So what I want to do is to share some of the other stuff. Some of the other stuff that had nothing to do with the that collection from Oxford University Library. And what I want to do, what I want to show you, is that if you want to look up anything to do with what's available in the National Archives, the British, not the Kenyan, but the British National Archives, you can go to series. There is a series called 533. If you see this, so you go to, if you do a search for the National Archives in the UK, the series that has a ton of material about that colonial period, the later colonial period, not the early, later meaning the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. It's series 533. CO meaning Colonial Office, series 533. So if you go through here, you will see a lot of stuff. For example, you can see land grants, all that stuff. But there's something here I want to show you. There is something I want to show. Bear with me. If I go to browse, I'll go to discovery. If I simply enter Kenyatta, all right, you will see a lot of stuff about Kenyatta here. So it tells you all the documents they find. In this case, it says it found 170 results. Some of it may not have directly to do with Kenyatta, but will have something. This is about succession to Kenyatta, the hospital, as you can see, the future. You can see the years when the record was made, and so on. There is also a set of documents from earlier, even before independence. There we go. So here we go. So before he became Jomo. So this is from 1930-31 about the Kikuyu Central Association. If you click here, click on it. And so this tells you what the record is about. It doesn't tell you how many pages. However, the sad thing is you cannot download that record. You cannot see it because it's not yet digitized. But everything in 533, record 533, I believe the whole set to do with Kenya is available in the Kenya National Archives. So you don't have to get it from the British Archives. You can go to the Kenya National Archives and request the documents in this series, 533. It's huge, it's massive. And you will not be able to see, you cannot get the whole list, the whole document, because it's too much. So what you do, you select a subset from that archive, and what you get from the National Archives, if you want, I believe you can sit down and read. I don't know if you can. Anyway, so what I do is to request the...
I think you can read. I think so.
Okay. So what I like to do is to get a printout so I can read and have a copy for future reference, because it takes a long time to read. So this is just one of them. So I asked, and this is what they gave me. This is just one of them, and it's very good because now I have it. I can read it at will. I can make copies, so I have it for future reference, because you don't want to read it just once. You want to make sure you can read it again and again and again. So that's the British Archives. There is some documents in the Kenya National Archives that were removed by the Kenyan government. And that's where I was saying that having records outside of Kenya, sometimes in some scenarios, is a good thing. And I know of one record, very interesting, that's very interesting, that's missing from the National Archives in Kenya. You remember it was supposed to be a crime to even imagine the death of the president. You remember those days? I was not a grown up or newborn. I was a young child, so I have no idea. But I'm told it was a crime to imagine the death of the president. So what happened is, when Kenyatta was in detention, if you read the archives, the documents from the colonizers, you can see there was a time Kenyatta was sick when he was in detention. And when he was very sick, uh, the government was worried about what happened if he died in detention. That document, that record, was originally in the Kenya National Archives. Today, if you go there and you request it, it's gone. It's not there. That discussion, because they were worried about what the reaction would be from the public. That record is gone. It's not available from the National Archives. And I believe it was intentionally removed by somebody. Maybe in the 70s, must have been removed on purpose. However, like I said, you can get the original copy from the British Archives. That discussion is there. So you can still find that discussion. So there are some few things here and there that are lost. But when you go outside of Kenya to see the same copy of the data, you can see the full copy. So it has been a helpful thing having the copy outside of Kenya. Now, it becomes more difficult to reach that document, but if you can, it's very helpful. So that's all. I mean, there is a lot more I would have loved to share, but because of time, I want to close here. And hopefully I gave an idea of what's available in the Kenyatta papers. I wish, like I said, I wish it can be, someone can go through and do a series on all these documents because they are very helpful. Also, if someone can combine them, maybe digitize them and put them publicly somewhere in an edited fashion so that you can do a search. Let's say you want to look up Fred Kufai. You can do a search for Fred and you see every reference to him. Or you can do a search for Jane Kenyatta. You can do a search, type in Jane, and you can see all the letters that mention Jane, or such and such. Because right now, if you go through the 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 archives in the University of Oxford, you cannot do a search that way. The summary is very small; it's only a few lines, so you cannot see that. Let me see if I can find it. Here we go. So this, I hope you can see this. So this is from the University of Oxford, and these are the copies of letters from Kenyatta with transcript and so on, from 21 to 71. What you see here, this is the only summary you get. There is a lot missing from this summary because it's just a summary of what the content. But so you don't get all the details. So, but if all of it was digitized, you can do a search on the entire record, not just this summary here that's in text. All right, thank you very much, and I hope that's helpful. This is the book that I mentioned last time for those who may be interested. This is a book on Kenya's boundaries. I don't know if you can you see it.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's feasible. Yes. Maybe you stop sharing so that the screen can be seen on the larger screen. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
good.
There was
Yeah,
somebody who was asking about it in after the last
yeah.
conversation. Yes.
And if someone wants a copy, I will give you a phone number. They can write to in WhatsApp in a phone number, in a Kenyan phone number, and I'm sure we can arrange to have a copy given to them in Nairobi.
Yeah. So maybe before you go, just a few questions. I think the first one, you've mentioned this that you don't know how some of these letters got into the hands of PCA. Number one, I've always assumed Kenyatta was a Catholic. Maybe I was wrong on that. And then number two, some of these letters are very private, as you've said, as you put it. They are father to daughter. Um, is it possible that some of these letters are available in these archives because we don't know, and you've mentioned this, that we don't have this culture of donating, our leaders donating their records to the public archives. I don't know whether Kenyatta did that. So if he didn't do that, how did these letters get into the hands of these people? And especially the letters that are, for example, from him to the daughter, you assume it got from him, the daughter received it, the daughter, in case, or unless then the daughter, for example, did give out these documents later. How do you
I,
imagine that happened? Or was this like the surveillance that was going on? The letter comes out, they grab it, they do some copying of it, and then they deliver the letter.
I'm not sure. I am not sure. I honestly do not know, but I can say this for sure. Kenyatta had association with the PCA before the Roman Catholic Church. I believe so. He went for training, or he was going to the PCA church in Kikuyu town, Church of the Church. So that was the original Kenyan PCA church in the interior of Kenya. So there was a long time connection between him and that church. And as you can see there, he is asking for baptism for his children. He is asking for blessing of his marriage. I believe so. His marriage in the Presbyterian church. So some of his family remained Presbyterians. And I believe, I don't know this for sure, but I believe Margaret Kenyatta, the mayor, who became the mayor of Nairobi, I believe she remained Presbyterian all her life. So I can see the connection with the church, the Presbyterian, but how they came to own the record set, I don't know. The other, even more worrying thing is why they would give some of that information to a journalist, someone who has no connection with Kenyatta, because it's very private matters.
And coming to this journalist, because, and this is speculation, I like to qualify so that people are clear. Uh, what information have you gotten out of or about him, the guy you mentioned early? Is it possible he wasn't actually a journalist and he was somebody else reading as a journalist?
I believe if he was the journalist I'm thinking, he was a genuine journalist, because you can see, if you do a search, you can see a lot of reporting he did all over in Africa, and he later taught journalism in a university at the university level. So he was a journalist. Now, whether he did other things, I don't know, but he looks like a genuine journalist. Uh, what I'm going to do is to go through the interviews he did with those other people like James Gishoro, because those interviews will give you some idea of the direction he was leading the questions to. Now, I don't know if Kenyatta gave his records to public, his personal and professional records. I don't think that happened. I have never come across that anywhere, and I don't believe it exists. The same thing with President Moi, nothing whatsoever. There was talk when Moi Kibaki passed away, or was after presidency, that there will be a library under his name. I don't think that ever came to be. I don't think so. I don't think so. We clearly have a long way to go in sharing that material with the public afterwards. And by the way, when the documents are shared, let's say Mike Kibaki's family, it does not have to be public that day. It can be shared under the condition that it will become public after, say, 20 years. Or maybe this subset of records will not become public until 50 years or whatever. Remember the last governor of Kenya, Patrick Renison? No, not the last one. He was the governor during Mau Mau period. His records are still sealed. So his records that were donated or given to the British Archives, I believe they are still sealed up to today in 2025. So you can give the records for public information, but they can be under seal until so many years.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's a lot of information that is getting lost, of course, and this is a conversation that is ongoing about. We don't have records from at least written records, of course, people say we have oral, but that's, of course, is not 100% reliable. We don't have written records from maybe before colonialism, but now we are creating records, at least for the last maybe 70 or 80 years, but we are losing those records again. And
Yep.
maybe in 100 years, 200 years, the story will repeat itself. Yeah, we did have the records, but we lost them. And I guess it's mostly is because people fear what might be in those records or how they might be portrayed. And so they decide we are not going to release those records. Or maybe it's just something nobody considers or thinks about.
I think it's both. Maybe fear of the information in the records. Also, because we simply don't have that tradition of donation of that records. Also, because there is such a large amount of corruption going on. So obviously, you wonder what are you going to give anyway. I mean, some of the stuff that happens. I mean, if you look at the recent JKIA saga, the sale or the holding with Adani, clearly there was a lot of shady dealings going on. And there is no way that will ever become known. The true extent of what was being planned, or even what they do today, we will never know. Just like anybody else, I understand the ownership of e-citizen, about Shah and all that. There is a lot of doubt who owns it or who controls. I don't think the people who planned this, JKIA and the e-citizen, I don't think they ever want that information to be public. So they will never share that. The contract with the contracts and how that was given, I don't think that will ever be done. Now, compare with the original railway line. When you go to the archives in London, you can see all the bidding, all the bidders of the railway line. You can see what they proposed, how much they proposed to be paid. And by the way, the ranges are all over. One of them is twice another. One is twice the value of another one. So you can see all of that information. It's available. But with some of the stuff we do, the public works that we do in Kenya, I don't think the people who plan it, I don't think they ever want that information to be public.
Because of extreme personal interest and
Yes, I believe so.
and ethical
Yes.
issues, and so they are like, which is very unfortunate. And then you talked about this translator who was translating these letters. Sounds like could be some missionary or something like that.
He,
Many of
he,
them,
he is a priest.
yeah, many of them did come and they did stay with the people for a long time, and many of them speak the language. But of course, if you are not, you do not grow that language, there is a level you reach and then you don't. So you think it was a priesthood who was translating them?
It is a priest because you can see his name. I forget the name of the priest, but it is a priest, British priest.
And what was the motivation if you speculate? Because that would be speculation.
No, I think what happened is this guy, Jeremy Brown, he obviously came to know there is some sort of records by the Presbyterians. So he went to the headquarters in Nairobi. He asked, so he must have initiated the whole process. Jeremy initiated the request, and the priest or the church, I don't know if it was just the priest himself. I don't believe that it can be the priest alone because we are talking about the personal life of the president at that time. So it must have been approved at a higher level.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Because at this, that was not like 2025. That was,
No,
when was that? That was like maybe the 70s.
1970.
Yeah, so and the
Yeah,
Kenyatta was still the president at that point. So
yes,
but yeah, and I think there was some level of fear that people had
yes,
government. So there must be somebody higher up who kind of like say it's okay. Maybe somebody in the secret, in the whatever, what was it called? The people who do whatever, so espionage or things,
yes.
they must have known about it and be like, okay, that's fine, you can release that. And that if that is the
Yeah,
case, then it means there are other records that were never likely.
correct. And like I said, it does. It humanizes Kenyatta. You can see Kenyatta, the father, the husband. You can see him very well. I know pretty well. But it also shows someone who was not very rich. So someone who in the 50s until 1960, before independence, was not very rich. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I see what you're trying to say. Yeah. So of course it shows him as a normal human with family and with emotions and with care and worries. Like, this is
Yeah,
interesting when, for example, he talks about having the heart fixed. Yeah, like
yeah,
that's a very good example of the records humanizing, make him look like these are things that ordinary people talk about. Oh, tell your mother to do that, and then tell,
yes.
yeah, yeah, that
And
was,
and and he's asking for corduroy pants at some point. It's just like any human being, any person asking his family for stuff. Give me a jacket. and I would like a jacket that fits me well. I hope you know my size so you can get the right jacket. He is asking about honey, and he makes a comment about honey being support. I'm trying to translate directly. Support for old men, stuff like that. Clearly, you don't eat honey, like the way you eat githeri. So it must have been. I think it must have been for alcohol.
Maybe Muratina or something like that.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah.
this is interesting. It's a lot of documents. Yeah, it's a lot of, it seems like the ones you've gone through, and that tells me that's not like the entire things. Those are just the ones that
Yes.
you thought you're going to pick for this, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, unless you have something else, I think I don't have more questions. Now,
Yeah.
the last
I
question
think.
before I saw something, maybe you remember that there's a place and it's a letter that is written in Kikuyu. And down there it says, I get some little of Kikuyu, but of course I can't say that I understand the language that well. But when you mentioned him telling, I think it's the daughter that I leave you to something like to the care of God, but the letter was in
Mm,
Kikuyu. I'm interested to
yeah.
know what name did he use for God? That might seem like an odd name.
Oh, that's a very good question. Uh, and I thought about it when I read the document. He uses in that particular letter. He says Mwene Nyaga. Mwene Nyaga. That was one of the original names for God in the Kikuyu language, in the Kikuyu tradition. In other letters, he uses all sort of other names. He uses Gai. He uses Mwene Nyaga. In Swahili, he uses Mungu. So he is all over. His phrase or reference to God sometimes is traditional, sometimes is more Christian. So he goes back and forth, which is not very unusual. Even today, you will still find people going back and forth.
Yeah, yeah, people go back and
He
forth.
was Kenyatta. Kenyatta was a Christian completely, but at the time he was culturally completely a Kikuyu.
That's an interesting way to look at him as a person. Because yeah, I think that's is then make that makes him very complex, if you ask me. At least his
Very
belief
complex.
system. His belief system.
Yeah, and yes, and if you remember, like I said, when he grew up, because there is some doubt when he was born, it's not very clear. But when he was a young person, everything around him was all African traditions, everything. By the time he became a teenager, things began to change. By the time he became a parent or became a young parent in the 1920s, things had changed substantially. So he himself was a Christian and seeking to have his children baptized. When he is talking of his children, he wants them to get education. And he is very, very insistent on that. And not just education to become a doctor, medical doctor.
Yeah, so yeah, I think my net is kind of messing up right now. Looks like it's about to go off. So I think we covered most of very interesting. This was an interesting conversation. Maybe we can come back to the same topic later, if it's
Yeah.
okay with you, and then we can look at other stuff,
Yes, of course.
especially if we get like a few documents that have very specific kind of data in them, and then now we just go deep with those ones so that we focus on few, but
I think I lost you. Okay.
yeah, 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 we can do that. Yeah, so thank you for, unless you have something else to
All
say.
right. No, thank you for the chance, and I hope it was clear. I hope I went good pace, not too quick or too slow.
No, you were fine. You were fine. You were fine. You were very much okay. Yeah, I really appreciate.
All
Seems
right.
like you put in a lot of time and effort, and I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.